look at... Does anybody want to have a break and get a drink or something? Because we could do that. 7:30.
Have you put your hands up yet?
Hey? No, I'm fine. I had a rum on the way down. The thing shut down. This is Gardo on the weekend. I just happened to have that one up.
That's not Gardo.
Isn't it? Who is
Doug
it?
him again.
Oh, Duck, that's what I meant. Dougie. Sorry. I get that, yeah. And you can see how open the jib is here. That's perfect. And the mainsail twisted nicely. Still got some depth in the head of it there. You can see the stripes. Not too deep through here. And see the angler heel. This is the thing that makes the difference, is he's got like this much of the top side showing. I reckon most of the boats out there in the weekend had water running along the edge of the boat. You know, this part of the boat was in the water. So that's what we're going to talk about right now. You guys all switched on to vectors, vector addition, and vector resolution. Like, if you get two forces, a vector shows magnitude and direction of the force. That's the first thing. Okay, so this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 something or others, kilos or something, force in that direction. And there's somebody else here, same scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this direction. If you were pushing on a wheel thing that had wheels on it or something, and somebody was pushing in with that force in that direction, and somebody else pushing this force in this direction, the trolley would go in this direction, and with a force of whatever that measures there. So it's a method of adding forces together and coming up with a total force. Okay, so you'll see why it's important in a second. And resolving the resolution of forces, if you have a total force, like the one that we got in that last drawing there, you can resolve it into two other forces by using a parallelogram of forces, and it's just a mathematical constant. So this one force here, you can break it down into these two forces, and these two forces will add up to this force. If you want to do it at right angles, those two forces add up to this force. Okay, so the resolution is important when you start looking at things like... See, this is a apparent wind diagram. So, set up the right way. Yeah, this is a boat doing 9 knots upwind and 12 knots of wind. So you draw the boat wind is in the opposite direction to the way the boat's travelling. So when your boat's going upwind, it is creating a wind. Like if you want to feel what the apparent wind is when you're driving, put your hand out the window and you can feel it. It's always dead ahead. Unless it's really windy, like it was the other day. So when a boat's going upwind, you draw the vector for the boat wind in this direction because that's where it is. Now this is the true wind here. So the apparent wind, if the wind's at this strength here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, say 9 knots there, this will be the apparent wind that the boat is sailing in. Okay? Now if the wind increases to 12 knots, this is the apparent wind here. So what's the apparent wind done? It's gone aft. It's gone aft, hasn't it? Because here's your boat sailing up here like this. Here's one, and here's the gust. So does that tell you something about automatic reactions to gusts? Hey? Point up. Because the apparent winds come aft. So not only does it power you up because the wind strength goes up, but it powers you up because the apparent wind comes aft. So you've got to, the automatic reaction, there's a lot of automatic reactions I look for when I'm watching people sail. And I'm looking right up your centre line, and I can see your forestay against the background, which is what you should be seeing. So the automatic reaction to pressure up is the bow should lift. If it doesn't lift, the boat leans over. Okay, so that's the reason, and this is the reason that the apparent wind, this is the reason you need twist in your sails, because as you go, as you come, here's your mainsail, like this. We're looking in from the stern. Here's your boat, and the sails twisting open in the head. So the more you come off sea level, you're
going to window, are you?
yeah. This is sailing away from you, upwind. The more you get up off the water level, the more wind there is. Okay, so if the bottom part of your sail's sailing in this wind strength, and the top's in this wind strength, the apparent wind's further aft up here than it is down in the water. So this is why you need the sail twisted, so that the power, one of the power sources is angle of attack, which is the angle between the cord, the extension of the cord, and the apparent wind. This is angle of attack. The greater the angle of attack, the more the power goes up. Okay? But as the power goes up, the more chance there is for the sail the flow to separate off the leeward side. So if you don't have twist, like you're going to have the bottom part of your sail sailing in this apparent and the top in this apparent. So if you've got to trim properly, it's going to stall. And the aerodynamics guy that taught us all this shit said you should never say stall, because it's flow separation that you get. And we'll talk about that in a sec. But okay, this is why the apparent wind diagram is worth sort of keeping in the back of your mind, and it's telling you just what happens in gusts and what your reaction should be. And a lot of us have those reactions, but a lot of us don't. Okay, so there's a diagram of, computer-generated diagram of the forces on a sail, and you can see the flow coming on here. The high-speed flow on the back of it creates low pressure, and the lower speed here creates high pressure. So you can see how big the low pressure forces are, and you can see how as they get further aft, if this was the centre line of your boat here, they get more and more square to the centre line. And when they get back here, they've actually got little aft components. Up here, the force is taking you forward. Back here, they're taking you backwards. So there's little aft components, and it sort of, if you look at that, look at this, it tells you don't have the leech hooked up, don't have the traveller up above centre line, all that sort of shit. So some smart guy, a lot smarter than me, adds all these forces together and comes up with, comes up with a total sail force, which is this one. So that's your total. Now this is the total sail force, the force of lift and drag on a sail. So this, if you put this in a wind tunnel and you have the wind blowing through here, and this is what you'll read. You'll read lift on a gauge over here, and drag, which is in the opposite direction to the onset wind. So if the wind's coming from here, the drag's in that direction. So using, again, the analysing the forces with a parallelogram, you end up, parallelogram this way, you end up, this is drag, this is lift, and this is the total force of the sail. So we're trying to get total force of the sail. So don't even think about lift and drag, we're looking at total force. How do you make that smaller so it's all on there?
Up the top there where it says 105 degrees.
Oh, that's it. I knew somebody would be able to see it. That's not good either.
There's a minus symbol up there too.
No, that's better. Do we want to? Oh, it's too hard to read. Can you read it like that?
Control, Alt, line, arrow.
Try the rotation.
Yeah, there is a rotation here somewhere.
Go view.
Yeah, you're right. You know what you're talking about.
Rotate view.
Rotation. Clockwise or anti-clockwise? Oh, shit. I went clockwise. Oh, lucky break. So here we are. So this is the forces that act on your boat, right? And this is why boats won't go past a certain speed. And the concept of this, you don't have to understand it all, but the concept's important, and it'll show up. So okay, here's the total force taken off that lift and drag thing, and now we're changing it into side force, which is at right angles to the centre line of the boat, right? Side force and force driving the boat forward. So, and these are the equal and opposite forces that act on your centreboard, because Newton said for every force there's got to be an equal and opposite force. So this is the keel countering the side force, and the lift off the keel countering the total force of the sail. So when these forces are in equilibrium, the boat doesn't go sideways, it goes straight. Okay? Now if these forces are slightly bigger than these forces are slightly bigger than that, the boat will make leeway. And most boats make leeway, and I'm not allowed to draw on this, so your course is actually from here, right? Your course is going slightly crabbing to leeward. So this angle, this leeway angle here, is the angle of attack the water makes on your keel. Right? If the boat was going dead straight, you'd end up with the water flowing same speed around both sides of your keel, no lift. So to get lift, you've got to have some angle of attack, and that's caused by leeway. And if you get too much and your keel stalls, you just go sideways. And you'll see it sometimes in starts. Stars are really good at it because they've got a crap keel on them. You know, it's just a flat thing with a bit of round each end and a big mainsail. And sometimes you'll see the novices, and they'll be in like 6, 8 knots of wind, and they'll just cramp the main on when the gun goes, and they just massively load the keel, and they just go straight sideways and run into the bloke to leeward who's screaming his head off. So you've actually got to get them moving and get some flow on the keel before you crank the sheet on. So what we're saying here now is, okay, this is the side force, this is the drive. So the more side force you can carry, the more drive forward you get. Can you see that? So the amount of drive forward you get is relevant to side force. You can see why now they weigh all the crews. You know, because you've got 3 Dennis Connors sitting along the side of the boat. Now you can get the side force, you can carry us out here somewhere. And so what happens, as soon as the boat starts to move, it's not actually drawn on this, but just got to believe me. As soon as the boat starts to move, it's accelerating because these forces, this driving force, hasn't got built up any drag yet. The boat's sitting there, no drag. As soon as it starts to move, drag starts to build up. As soon as the drag equals this driving force, okay, the forces then are in equilibrium. And Newton says if forces are in equilibrium, the boat moves at a constant speed or stays stationary. Like if it's not moved, if it's got too much drag, if you had the thing tied to the dock, you could fill the sails and it's not going to go anywhere because there's not enough force to break the rope. But as soon as it broke, it'd accelerate. So what we're doing, we fill the sails, boat starts to move, the drag starts to build up until it becomes the same length as this, right? So that's as fast as we can make that boat go. And all your boats are the same. They all have the same drag. They're the same shape, same weight. Some of them have got different weight keels, I believe. But this is the theory, right? So this is how you get target speeds. And if you get a good ocean race, the race of these days that's well designed, you get a chart with target speeds on it. Have you seen them? It says if it's blowing 10 knots, you should be doing 5.5 or 6 knots or something. And if you're not sailing the boats to its targets, and your VMG is either down or up. This is why you can't sail boats to VMG gauges. You can sail them to target speed gauges, because if the speed gets too high, right, the VMG will go down because you're not pointing high enough. And sometimes if you're in flat water and you're sailing high and slower, your VMG will actually be quite high, because that's how it is. And this is how we know that in rough water you've got to sail the boats a little faster to have a good average VMG than you do in flat water where you can sail them really high. Because in flat water, the drag that's caused by the hull, and it's caused by everything, the hull, the sails, everything. You can't get lift without drag. And you saw that on the one here. This diagram here, as soon as you get lift, you get drag. And the drag there is just the drag of the wind across the sail. But when you come to this one, right, it's the hull. It's the hull drag, wind blowing across the rigging, everything is drag. So this force here has got to overcome that. So you can see there's an angle of heel that you sail an etchel at that is the minimum drag, right? And that's because when you heel a boat, if you're sitting in the dock here, your water lines are like this. Okay? And if you just give this boat a shove, it'll go straight. Everybody agree with that? Yep. So as soon as you lean it over, the water lines do this. Now when you shove that boat, which way does it want to turn? Left or right? Left. Yeah, left. So that's going to give you weather helm. And when boats are designed, there's centres of effort in the sails between the jib and the mainsail, and there's a thing called, when they put the keel on, you've got to imagine the boat sort of sitting on a pin like this, and when the sails fill, it's got to balance. So when the boat, if the boat is sitting up straight, and you could make it sit up straight all the time, the pin would be right in the centre of this centre of effort of the two sails. But because the boat leans over and wants to go to windward, then the keel is put a little bit further forward of that, pin position there. So it's called lead. So when they design the boat, they shift the keel. Is that right? Further forward? No, that's worse. Back. Should go back. Yeah, further aft to counter weather helm. You've got to think, if you put the keel back here, then the bow would just fall away really quickly. So shifting it up fixes weather helm. So they've made allowance here for the boat to lean over to a certain angle. Now, if it leans over further than that, you get weather helm generated by the hull. And the sails are generating weather helm as well, some weather helm, but the boat gets out of balance. Then you start using rudder on it, drag, everything's drag. So what we're trying to do is minimise the drag so that we can use all this forward arrow to push the boat forward. And if we keep the drag down, the boat sails up to its targets. If we lay it on its side, it won't sail to its targets, because as soon as the drag gets bigger than this force here, if the drag gets bigger, the boat slows down until they become equal again. Can you see that? The slower the boat goes, the less the drag. So if you lean the boat over and the drag goes up, the boat speed's got to come down until the two forces are equal again. But then you're getting a target speed that's under what it should be. So this is where you make losses. So here we are again. Where do we go? View.
Second from the left top.
Yeah, I've got it. I'm just trying to get the mouse there. Rotate view. Perfect. Okay, so we don't need to see the top. Oh, Jesus. I mean, my goodness. So what we're saying now is that if we're using, the main and jib both, say it's 12 knots, and we haven't run out of riding moment yet, and we've got to think about riding moment all the time, and you'll see why. Then the force would be, if you worked out the power of the whole sail area, it'd be pushing on the mast there, right? And that side force, the total of all the side forces, is here, and it's a certain distance up from the centre of buoyancy, or there's a point down there, the keel's involved and everything, but the main thing is just got to realise that this multiplied by the force here, say it equalled 800, then this must be a dinghy I drew this for. You don't hike like this, do you?
Yes.
Oh, who said that? Your total centre of gravity here and riding moment is what's holding the boat up is a multiplication of the down force of it and the distance from the centre of buoyancy. So these two multiplications have got to be the same, come to the same answer. Because when the force is in equilibrium, what's the boat do? Angle of heel wise. It's constant. Constant. So when I look at the fleet and I see boats going like this, every time it does one or the other, the side force goes up or down. So you're not sailing with constant pressure on the boat. And every time it changes this. And the drag goes up and down. So you end up with all these forces fighting one another. Oh. So if this keeps going down and up and down and up, these keep coming in and out of equilibrium, and the boat's not sailing with a constant force on it, forward force, because the side force, as it gets bigger, the arrow gets bigger. The driving force gets bigger. So it's completely dependent on how much side force is how much drive forward you get. So can you see how important that is? And we need things that we can focus on. To make boats go, we don't want to be thinking about all this stuff, but we want to believe that what I'm going to tell you is good. Like this is a really big force, and it's got a heap of leverage on the boat. So it's easy to read, because if we get it wrong, the boat changes its angle of heel, right? So if you're doing this, you're getting it wrong. It's that simple. So, but the driving force is really small, and we can't monitor that. Like if you had a really accurate speedo on, you might be able to monitor it, but speedos on small boats don't work that well, because the speed's too up and down, and you've got to average it. By the time you average it, you've got to have it in the seat of your pants, and you've got to have a boat alongside you testing to go, yeah, we are going the right speed, let's see if we can get some height or whatever. But when I look at a fleet, I look at some boats at this angle, some boats at this angle, the best boats are at this angle. The top boats are always sitting up straighter. And, Dougie's boat there in that picture had about the right amount of topside showing. I can show you some others later on. So are we all cool with this? So every time your boat sits up like this, in down pressure, you should be powering the rig up. So you've got to think now, where does the power come from? And the major source of power is sail depth. Okay? So if you want to change your power dramatically, pull the backstay on or ease it off. And the next source of power is angle of attack, which is twist. Now the twist in your mainsail is a small change because it's changing angle of attack. Depth is a big change because that's where the major source of power is. And how do we change angle of attack? Huh?
Main sheet.
Yeah, main sheet. What else?
Leech tension.
Yeah, well that is twist. Yeah, your main sheet traveller is main sheet tension is twist. Traveller's always in the centre, so that's not a big deal. It's something we do all the time. Steer. Yes, exactly. You're steering the boat all the time to a fine adjustment of pressure because it changes the angle of attack on the whole rig. Right? So you've got to look at it like this. We set, and these, Etchells are not a flexible rig. They're a backstay rig which you have to change the depth physically. Like a 470 or any of those, some of the sport boats these days, when you sheet the sail on, the mast automatically bends. And when you get a gust, it bends a little more and opens the leech. That's a proper flexible rig. Yours is not flexible. It's man-controlled. So when you pull the backstay on and you set up a sail depth, right, this, who's got blue stripes on their sails? And most of them got them on? It's funny, I've been looking at them for 3 weeks now and I've noticed it in some of the pictures. So you're setting up a depth. That is a power source, right? And it's like when you're driving a manual car. Does anybody still drive a manual car? You're all lazy like me. No, you're all automatics. So,
Mark Ryan drives a manual car.
okay, you're probably all old enough to remember when you did drive manual cars. And when you get in a certain gear, you can use the accelerator, push it down, take it off. You can change your performance as you want. in that range of the gear. But as soon as you get out of that, you know, you get the hills a bit steeper and you put your foot down and it goes, yeah, and doesn't want to know about it. Boats are the same, except that you haven't got your foot on the accelerator anymore. Like some warped person who's adjusting the wind strength, he's giving you more wind and less wind and more wind, less wind. And he has a bad sense of humour because as soon as you get the boat set up really perfectly, it's going like a rocket, changes the wind strength on you. And you've got to do something. So your backstay setting sets up a depth, and then you steer to it, you steer up, down, and you trim. Twist. Little open, little closed, one a little bit of height, trim on a little bit, steer high, all that stuff. Now, this depth is good for, I don't know, you can't, it's not a knot. You know, a knot is a lot of wind change. Like, it's a feel on your face and a performance in the boat. Like, if you can sail it at that depth and get your performance right and keep your height going and the speed's okay, that's good. But if you get over that, what's going to happen is the side force is going to increase because the power's coming up in the rig. And unless you change gears, you're starting to get into the situation where the boat doesn't perform properly. So if you go uprange, you've got to bring the depth down because that's your major source of power, and then do all the same things again. You steer and you trim. And play with the twist, all that sort of stuff. So you can see this is where you've got to focus, is are we in the right depth gear? Trim it properly. And on Saturday, I don't know who remembers it, I think Michael Morris will remember it, they got a really good start, and there's like 3 or 4 boats got a really good start and jumped out of the blocks. And like 100 metres after the start, there's a real soft patch. Does anybody remember that? Yep. Yeah, exactly. Good. I'm glad somebody's switched on to this, because Michael and his crew didn't feel it, and they went from being here in the front row with 3 or 4 boats like this to here. Now they dropped back about a boat length, and their height was poor. They started to fall on the boats under them because they didn't change up. They didn't just get the backstay up and bring the depth up. And straight ahead of them here was a line of pressure. Who saw that? Yeah. And the guys who were looking and did see it were hot-footing it towards there. So this is what happens. And then they tacked out and went over here, ducked a couple of boats, which is what happens if you tack out when you've lost a boat length. And by the time they got to the top mark, they were 7th. The boats that kept sailing out here changed gears here, sailed towards the pressure, tacked over, they were the boats who led at the top mark, if I was correct. So this is what you've got to focus on, is getting the depth right and doing the fine trim stuff. Then you've got to look. Somebody said to me on the weekend, what about the jib luff? And I said, well, you can't do anything about the jib luff sag. The luff sag, he said, forestay sag, I should say, forestay sag. You can't do anything in an etchel about forestay sag. Correct?
Oh, it's relative to the amount of much backstay you've got.
Yeah, but having said what I've just said, like when you set up the depth you want in your mainsail, what forestay tension you get's what you got.
The street tension on the main tube will bring the mast back.
But you've got the mainsail.
Compromise. So.
No, it's not a compromise at all. It's got nothing to do with it. You've got to set the main up with the right twist to give you the power you want, right depth and twist, And that's what the main sheet tension is, because main sheet tension gives you that, and the forestay tension you've got's what you got. End of the story. So it's important to have a jib that fits the mainsail. You know, because the jibs are cut with hollow in them. You know, like if a mainsail's cut with luff round in it, whereas a jib's cut with hollow in it. Like this. So they've all got mould shape in them, which I went to a bit of trouble today to... Where's my bag gone? Oh, here it is. So your sail has got, I made this little sail today. It's bloody good too. See this? That's the mould shape that's in your sail. And it's put in there by little, this has got about 2 millimetres of shape in each of those seams. And that's exactly what's in your actual sails. The computer that designs the sails, they put in all these chord depths that they want, and it builds a model, you know, a numeric model of the shape. And then when you say, I want to make it radial, it lays the cloths over the mould that it's generated and tells you how much seam shape to put in. So this is just cross-cut. So a couple of millimetres in each seam gives you a mould shape. So that is the base depth of your sail. So if I put more shape in this or less, this would come up either deeper or flatter. So this is where you've got to, you know, when you go to a sailmaker, he's got to be an actual sailmaker that knows what he's doing to come up with the right mould shape. And then when he puts the luff curve, draws the luff curve on here, it's got to fit your mast. Now, if your mast bends too much up here, you end up with... I don't know how I can do this. Here's how you do it. You end up with girts coming out of here. And I'll show you some of those in the pictures. So the jib's the same. The jib has a mould shape, things made to, and it's got a hollow in it. And a lot of the... Who's got a light and heavy jib? Yeah, so I'm not sure about the actuals, but I suspect they're the same. Like the star jibs, they're the same mould shape. They just have more hollow in them. And I suspect the actuals would be pretty much the same. They're the same sort of beast, because you don't really need a flatter sail. You need one that doesn't get too deep, right? So by putting the more hollow in, it allows you to... You know, it allows for the forestay sag, and your mould depth still gives you the right, you know, chord depth to provide power for the boat properly. So having said that, one of the big problems with forestay sag is that it changes the sheeting angle on the jib. Like if your forestay's here, and here's your sail, and let's say it's sheeting at, I don't know, say 10 degrees angle here, and the forestay's straight, then the whole front of the jib, it's going to be 10 degrees, and it's going to twist slightly as it gets up the sail. Yeah, that was a bit of a big twist. So it's going to twist like this as you go up. Can you see that? Because the airspeed's getting higher, and it's got to twist around the mainsail properly. So that's what's happening now. So when it's windy, the bottom of the forestay is still here, but the middle of the forestay is here to leeward. Right? So here's the centre line of your boat again. This is the sheeting angle here. And now if this is sheeted to where it was before, now the sheeting angle now, it's closed up. Like the whole sail's gone like this. So it's increased angle of attack quite heavily. Now if that's your wind there, and the wind here, it's supposed to be parallel. This sail's, because the forestay's gone, this sail's at a much higher angle of attack than this one where the forestay's on the centre line. Can you see that?
Is that why you experience luffing in your jib in the heavy breeze? Like your jib, they call it?
No, that's generally because the forestay sag. Like if you get forestay sag on your jib, it just does this.
Yeah.
It just makes it really knuckly in the front.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that'll show up as luffing. But what happens is the forestay sag, if you've got to actually twist the sail more. So that these two things, these two angles here, are still parallel. Yeah. No, not car aft, just ease. Like everybody thinks you have to twist the jib, you have to shift the car aft. You don't. You just ease the sheet. Easing the sheet on any sail twists it. And all you have to look at then is the foot depth right? Because when you ease, the foot depth increases slightly, right? But easing and pulling on controls the twist. Now the fact this forestay, when it sags out here, if you're looking at the leech of your sail on your spreader marks, they need to be in a totally different place. And they need to be like probably this much further out when you're carrying a lot of forestay sag, when it's windy. And this is what you see a lot of the time is that, and what happens if you're steering the boat, you know how you're sitting up on the rail and you can see the forestay, and all of a sudden it disappears? Because, and especially if you over trim the jib slightly, right, and you power this up, the forestay just goes, really goes to leeward. Because when it's setting up properly, the front of your jib's a bit like the front of a spinnaker. It actually sort of moves out there and stays out there, and it accepts the breeze on it without going like this and without being on a massive angle of attack all of a sudden stalling. So it's really critical in strong wind if you're using spreader marks to not, to move them out so that the sail's twisted more because of this change of angle of attack in the middle of the sail. Okay, so are we ready for a break yet?
Yeah, let's have a break. Yep.
Where is your dad?
Are we all back? We've lost a few.
Ready to rip, son.
Telltales. I never say sail a boat to telltales, but telltales will help you. It's like having a Formula One driver has a rev counter in his car and he probably hardly ever looks at it except when he's redlining or something, or he's got somebody up his bum and he's trying to do something special and he doesn't want to blow the engine. And then he'll look at it. And that's what you should use telltales for. Like you should sail a boat, feel for the pressure in the wind and steer up and down and have all the good automatic reactions to up-down pressure with your steering. But what sometimes you hit a bit of wobbly wind and you go, this is what's happening, and you just flick your vision onto the telltales. And this is something interesting I just thought of. Like sailing is people say you should concentrate harder. Has anybody ever said that to you?
100 times.
Yeah. And you should say, what on? What on? Eh? There's about 1 million things you should be focusing on, and you can't focus on them all at once. That was a 10-minute gun just went. And what you've got to get good at is focusing on the things that are important right at this second. And if you hit a bit of wobbly wind or something, focus in on your telltales, because they'll help you find out what's happening. You know, they'll stop you from being head to wind because it's a header or something like this. And then you get it sorted, and then change your focus to what's happening around you on the wind shifts and the fleet and stuff. And the thing you don't want to get stuck on is get your focus stuck in the boat looking for boat speed. And this is why your calibration is important. You should go, I know I should be on that backstay setting in this strength of wind. Just forget about it. Let's work with the trim and the pressure and everything, and work the boat speed up and sail the boat accurately. And people get stuck in pulling strings and they're not even anywhere near the right spot. And then they don't sail the boat properly. And then they miss 3 wind shifts, and it all turns to you know, well-known thing. Yeah, jelly. That was the word I was thinking of. So one thing that'll help you trim your jib properly for twist is having a telltale here, halfway back between the luff and the leech. There's one here on all the north sails, which is close to the luff. This one here reads separation here. This is where the separation on a jib starts from, because this is the max pressure. The highest plus minus is where separation starts. And it's at the highest point of the sail normally, where max depth is. So if I see somebody struggling for speed, like the other day with Gardo, I just whiz round and have a look, and the telltale's stalled out all the time. It just happens every time you see somebody struggling for speed. I know when I look at the jib from behind if it's over trim, because I know what the twist profile should look like, and you go around and have a look. If they've got this telltale on, you can see it straight away. So what you've got to get used to is, like when the sun's good and you can see through the sail, get used to looking at the leeward telltale and the windward one. Because the windward one normally is moving around a bit. It's never working properly unless it's really light air, because the sail's never the right depth. So get used to looking through the sails when you can, and trim. If this one even shakes like this, then the jib's on too hard. But the trick is to look at the steering telltales, because you should wait till the helmsman's got it, you know, in the groove properly, glance up at the leeward telltale. If he's steering off the wind, obviously the leeward telltale is going to stall as well. But if he's sailing, you know, a nice groove here, and he might come away just a touch, the leeward one should, up there, should break last. The steering telltale's leeward one should go, the top one last. Because this is an area of the jib that is dodgy, because the top of pointed sails are not good aerofoils. Now, they stall easily because the plus and the minus starts to jump from one side to the other and sets up a tip vortice, which is high drag. And as soon as this sets up, it washes very quickly down onto the top of the sail, and you lose this whole top driving part of the sail. That's why it's critical to have not get separation up here. So, and it's the reason that aeroplanes now have all have winglets on the end of their wings, right? You notice that? Because fuel's so expensive now, they're trying to cut drag down. Before, they didn't give a stuff because the fuel wasn't worth that much. But now, by putting winglets on the end of all their wings, they stop this plus-minus jumping from side to side, and it stops tip vortices and reduces the drag. It's like when trucks fuel started to get expensive. And they put them in the wind tunnel and realised that a truck that was this shape, like this, and then a big container sticking up like this, wasn't very aerodynamic. And the sides were all open, with all sorts of stuff sticking out here. So the next thing they fare this in, wasn't a very good cabin there, it should have been there. They fare this in like this and put covers on the sides of the trucks, save 10% of the fuel that they used to use. Aerodynamics and just cutting drag down. So this thing here is critical to your speed, and especially when it's windy. And the same thing on your mainsail is good leech ribbons, because leech ribbons do the same thing. And the mainsail's not quite as critical as the top of your jib. Leech ribbons here, you only really need one. As soon as you trim the mainsail on too hard, same thing happens. You start to get separation, and that's what sucks the leech ribbon round the back. Okay? So in light conditions, when you need all the grunt you can get, you should have this leech ribbon should be flicking in and out 50% of the time. Out, gone. Which says that there's just the tiniest bit of separation here near the leech, and that's max angle of attack. Angle of attack is power. So the maximum angle of attack you can get on your sails, more power you get for the depth you got. Okay, so flicking in and out. And as soon as it gets windy, then it doesn't matter. The leech ribbon's going to blow out there anyway, because you're twisting the sail and there's plenty of flow on it. It's not a problem. The other telltales that are worth having in the mainsail is some up the middle, like opposite each batten, say. One there, and one at the top. Because when you're sailing upwind, on the jib, and this is for trimmers. Like you're trimming a mainsail for some guy that's steering. You're steering the boat, basically. If you want the boat to go slow, just over trim the main. If you want to make the helmsman look good, trim it properly, and he goes fast and high. Is that a hint? What happened then? Anyway, these things are good depth indicators. Like, if you look at that sail there, you can see the depth here. It's got nice depth. It's probably too deep down here, and the depth here and here is good. And it actually has got some telltales on here. One there. That's good. If the sail's too deep, the windward telltales will just hang down like this. They won't flow. So when you're looking for power, you should be deepening it up so that the telltales flow sometimes, and then they're just sort of just flowing. That's telling you that the sail is as deep as you can get it. Now when you're sailing on the jib, like your jib and your main work together. Like the front of your jib is deep like this, but it's accepting a certain apparent wind angle, and it allows you to tack through the correct tacking angles that you want, which is probably, if it's 10, 15 knots, like 80 degrees or 75 or something. If the jib was this shape, like this, you'd want to be tacking through 10 degrees. The boat doesn't want to tack through 10 degrees. So when you get a jib that's the right depth, the mainsail has to fit in behind it. So if this is the apparent wind you're sailing in, the mainsail's got to flow at the same time. And when you get it set up right, if you sail high groove and your windward telltales just flicker like this, the mainsail one should all flicker as well. All these ones here should flicker, because that's saying that the two sails are working exactly the right angle in the wind and getting the right sort of power. Now the thing that happens with the main and jib on a thing like an Etchell, you've got a big mainsail like this and a skinny jib. That's a bit too skinny probably. A jib like this. So what happens when looking at it from the top, it's like this. Jib, mainsail. So what happens when the wind's coming in here, it sees the big mainsail before it sees the jib. And the air starts to bend because of the size of the mainsail. And so it bends like this, and it puts the jib sailing in a lift because it's bending to try and get through here and round the back of the main. So the jib is sailing in a lift, and if you look at the front of a Etchell's jib, it is massively deep. Agreed? And I see people sailing with wrinkles in the luffs of the jibs. Why do you do that? Most of you do it. Why do you do it?
Flatten the entry.
Eh?
To flatten the
Yeah.
entry.
And in light air, you're going to sail through the biggest tacking angle you ever do in light air, right? And so that's saying that the angle of entry on your jib needs to be as deep as possible, not as flat as possible. And I know when we used to race the old IOR boats that had big headsails like this and a really tiny little mainsail behind it, like the headsails were like this, like really flat entry, because the wind saw the big genoa first, didn't see the mainsail, and you had to have a fine entry to get the boat to point. As soon as we started making fractional rig jibs, they had to be really deep in the front. Otherwise, they wanted to take the boat too high.
But sailing with a soft luff tension, Fletcher's got a lot to do as well with, in light airs, having very little backstay on where the draft position is. In the jib.
No, it's not. It's just to do with how hard you pull the cloth. There's nothing to do with the forestay. It's just how hard you're stretching the cloth. And what happens is that that when you get wrinkles in a sail, you know, like little wrinkles like this, it shifts the drive aft. You know, the drive goes aft because you're putting little darts in. It's like putting more seam shaping in the front of the sail. So it's putting the drive aft, and it does make the sail a little deeper. So, you know, in light air, you could have just the smallest, like if you look just behind the luff tape is where you've got to look and see the wrinkles there, because when the sails, sometimes you've got to stretch quite hard because you're stretching the tape, but you haven't put any load on the sailcloth yet, you know, when there's any little wrinkles there at all. So you should pull hard enough so that they just nearly disappear. But having like great big dags coming off it like this is not good. I always say to people, if the sailmaker wanted it to look like that, he would have made it like that. Right? And as soon as you get more wind, like 10 knots of wind, you should have the thing no wrinkles, because then you want the drive forward. And what happens up here, where the jib's really skinny, the thing ends up looking like this. And this is the leech. You know, the drive goes right back in it and just hooks up, instead of looking, you know, like that. So it really affects...
Sorry, the top one is with no leech luff.
Yeah.
And the bottom one is with as per design.
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Yeah, and then they're not really. Draw it up here. That's what the jib should look like. And when you get it wrinkles in it, it looks like this. Straight off the luff and really hooky in the leech. And like you can't see it, but when I get off the boat I can see it and I go, wow. That really makes a difference. Like I was struggling with some guys.
Reverse of that, but you go,
Hey?
I actually thought it was the reverse of that, but that's me.
No. The more, it's the same with any cell. See this here. This is a classic example.
Yeah, right.
Right? These are all overbend creases because they're facing down on an angle like that. This means that the mould shape that's here, that's the luff there. So you can't flatten that mould shape without getting creases. If you overbend, hold that. If you overbend this, see, you start to, you get creases because this is a three-dimensional shape that you can't flatten. That's why your mudguard looks like shit when you run into the gatepost. Three-dimensional shape does not want to be flattened.
Yeah.
I've got one either side on my car.